I will call to order then, Committee of the Whole number 218 for September 21st. And in honor of the Liwatul, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. Any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion or any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole 216 from June 1st, moved by Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we'll dig right into it. We're on to our draft building bylaw. So we have some staff joining us.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can. Good afternoon. Oh, and now we have Ms. Pedrini too. Good afternoon to both of you. Thanks for joining us. If you're all settled in, we're ready to have a discussion about the draft building bylaw and turn it over to you.
Not sure how much of a presentation you'd like me to do. I provided council with a copy of the report. I can go through the discussion points that I outlined and maybe pause if there's questions. Would that work or?
Sounds great. Let's go through the highlights.
All right, I'll jump right into the discussion portion. There were a lot of changes made to this bylaw. The bylaw, even though it's only 2 years old, there were a lot of things that staff found when they started using the bylaw was missing, or the wording is not as strong as it could be. Also, MIABC came out with a model building bylaw that Pemberton should be following as a recommendation. So staff also compared that version of the model building bylaw with the current building bylaw and made amendments to that. So I'll just follow through a bit of the script in the discussion. I won't go through reading it word by word, and stop me please if that's not clear, if clarification is needed. Currently in the bylaw, we have provisions for stop work and do not occupy. There's really 4 situations where the building official would go out and issue orders on. One is work without permit, and then stop work, do not occupy, and then lastly is unsafe to occupy. So those are somewhat a little bit different, and now the current bylaw has wording for all of that. Also added for the building official to do is to revoke permits under section 7.4. It's a last resort to revoke an issued permit and has to be done prior to occupancy. That's usually done if a permit was issued in error. Then moving forward to point number 3, there's all these different parts and sections added really from the MIA model building bylaw on responsibilities of the owner, owner's constructor, and the registered professionals. Maybe one thing to highlight here is that we added under the owner's responsibility about the runoffs that we are seeing in some construction sites on the hillside. So this is to protect during construction, sort of the dirty sites, runoffs to the other buildings or neighboring buildings and so forth. Any questions on all that before I move on? Okay, moving forward under point number 4, sections were added to deal with stale permits. The workload isn't too many in Pemberton. Other places really have scenes like, I've been to places where there are thousands of these what we call dog files usually. And these are files where the permit may be ready for pickup and the people haven't picked up. Or permits where for some reason they have stopped constructing and the permit is just kind of sitting there without any further inspections. And expiry dates. So we want people to finish the work. So there's an expiry date on all that. And if work is continuing, but they stopped, then all that work is still valid work as long as it's documented under an inspection report. And then when they need a new permit to pick up the remaining work, the new permit would just reflect on that remaining portion. One thing to note is that any new work must comply with the building code and bylaw of the day. So it can be a very old permit, but the finishing work may be a little bit more restrictive, because usually building codes are more restrictive as they go along. Under point number 5, we have a whole section just dealing with tenant improvement permits. It's really an administrative section boiling down the requirements we're seeking in terms of the drawings and other requirements that we need to see for paperwork purposes. So this is a little bit more condensed for tenant improvement permits. And that should make the issuance of tenant improvement permits, a submission and issuance, a bit easier. 6, just a little bit change on the fees and charges, linking the two bylaw together, building bylaw and the fees and charges bylaw. 7 is about valuation of permit. So we charge a building permit based on what the declared construction cost is. Currently, we are using Marshall and Swift, but it's not really spelled out in bylaw. So this is a section where we clarify what we consider to be cost of construction, and that is including hard and soft costs. The soft cost sometimes is what applicants are missing in this case. Moving on to point number 8 is a whole bunch of different additions on security deposits within the bylaw. And this is taking a deposit which is refundable if the damage is not done. Usually it's for to cover damages to trees and other villages infrastructure. Section 9, plumbing permits. The current bylaw have a section on, a whole separate section on plumbing work, and we are revising that to include an alternate way to accept plumbing work. It's very good that Chris Theron now, he's also a level 1 plumbing inspector, or sorry, plumbing official under BOEBC's system. But prior to that, the village didn't have a qualified plumbing inspector. So this is a section that can be put in to be used or not used on using an authorization system. This means if the applicant is a licensed plumber, we have the choice to use a declaration that they've done the work. We can also send in another licensed inspector another licensed plumber to go in to look at the work. So this is an alternate way of doing it if Chris is not available or otherwise cannot attend the site. Moving on to point number 10, just changing definitions on pools and ponds and covering swimming pools. The swimming pool regulations have been in different jurisdictions really to cover safety, requiring a fence around open water. So we just missed this summer season. So this will be in place for next season. The other additional section put into here is to have a very specific geotechnical review when these heavy bodies of waters are introduced to hillsides or sloping lots. Point number 11 is about, yes.
I'm going to stop you. I think we have a question or two before you carry on, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving on to point number 12, is about valuation of permit. So this is a section on whole separate section on plumbing work. And
Okay. Councillor Craddock, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Mayor Richmond. Ms. Wu, just wanted to talk about the pools and ponds. A permit is required first time it is installed. With that permit, does that also include the cost of filling the pool for the first time with town water?
We haven't really gone down that level of details. I think the idea here is to encourage people to come in to get permits. Really is to kind of have a quick check that they are installed properly in the safety aspect. So I don't imagine we want to overtax that construction cost for the purpose of gaining that extra little bit of dollars and discourage people coming to get permits. But we can certainly look at it if council wishes to go into that details. But I'm assuming these will be very minimal minimum fee permits. Maybe somebody, I'm not as up on the fees right now. Maybe
Thank you very
Gwendolyn
much.
and Chris can help me with that. There's a minimum fee currently with the permits.
CEO Gilmore, did you want to help?
I just wanted to talk about the utilities with respect to the pools. We have had a couple that we issued this year, and that was provided to finance. As you may or may not recall, we do have a provision for swimming pools as far as our annual utilities. And if it was a permanent pool, that would be something that would be added to their tax roll onto their utility billing.
Okay, so everybody that has an above ground pool would be charged for filling the pool one time, is that correct?
I'm not sure if it would necessarily be one time. That's something we have to look at this point. It's shown in our bylaws an annual fee. So that's something we may want to bring back and discuss at utilities coming this year as to what that looks like. Is there a difference between a full in-ground pool, a small seasonal one? I think it's something we need to have a little bit more conversation about, because I just don't think the way it is now is truly reflective of what's happening. But at least now with the permit, that is information that can be shared with finance to communicate across departments.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Wu, back to 9, with that new proposal for approving and accepting plumbing permits, with our chief building inspector's workload, is this going to slow down or accelerate or do nothing to the process or the timelines for builders?
I'm not as up to speed on the current workload. Perhaps I can defer that to Mr. Jerome to answer.
Chris, if you were able to comment, maybe to give us an idea of like current timelines.
It's not affecting any timelines. I quite often will do plumbing inspections, other required building inspections. So it's not setting anything back.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions before we go on to number 11? Okay, carry on, Ms. Wu.
Okay, carrying on point number 11. Part 22 is introduced to look at when buildings are relocated within the village. Most of these would, my understanding is covering, say, school portables would be one that we deal with normally. And we are other trailers being moved from elsewhere to the village. So we just want to make sure that the snow load is addressed, because a lot of times these temporary buildings may not be designed to the Pemberton weather. Part 12, I had a really long look on the occupancy requirements and setting up a better framework on what to do with a lot of these provisional occupancies. First of all, introducing a occupancy for building shell. These will most likely be the industrial buildings that we're seeing where the developer builder would build just a building shell itself, and each individual units are being outfitted by the subsequent users. So this way we can have an occupancy just on the building shell itself. Secondly, on provisional occupancies, there's two types. It's a village's somewhat practice before, where we allow for a owner builder to finish off portion of the building, the house, let's say, whether it's a carriage house or the basement suite, to have it finished living in it while they finish off the building. So the new provision being introduced really, sorry, the new sections introduced really is to address our current practice on this. And then also the provisional occupancies can be used to accept occupancy for buildings where maybe they cannot finish certain work, like the outside work, and we'll take a performance security to secure it against the unfinished work as a bit of a stick and carrot. We want to note at.
Could I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, may I ask a question on the, what kind of powers do we have over people that move into their house without an occupancy permit with a time expiry on it, but they don't meet that? Where do we stand with doing something about that after that time?
It's always a case by case situation. We want to see why they cannot finish the house. If it's the matter of supply issue or labor issue, and we get a feeling that there's good intention to finish it, then the easiest way is probably to extend expiry, would be one. But if there are cases where it's not the case, then when we issue the provisional occupancy, it's part of the provisional to have a condition that the owner must make alternate arrangements to move out prior to the expiry date, so that, and then they agree to it. So there's a little bit of paperwork on tracking that. And if everything else fails, we probably will be looking at a Section 57 registration. But again, that's a last resort. And also revoking permit. That could be a situation where we revoke the actual permit. Again, as a last resort. So there are many different ways depending on the situation itself.
Thank you very much.
Just want to go back to the occupancy. One last point is because of the introduction to the cost of construction, we want to have a stop to reevaluate the fees at occupancy and adjust the building permit fees as necessary. And this is kind of to minimize the dispute at the beginning or the end of the project on what the construction cost is and what the building permit fee should be. Point number 13 is on the BC step code. So this is just an administrative section. Pemberton introduced the energy step code back with the 2019 bylaw. And it was a two-step process where you introduce certain step, I think it was step 2 and 3, I have to go back on the old bylaw, on January 1st, 2020 and January 1st, 2021. So both dates have passed. So the current wording is really to collapse what the intended steps are going to be, and clarifying what do we mean by Part 9 commercial building, because commercial buildings are not really defined in the bylaw. So the current wording is to clarify it. At this point, staff is also seeking council to endorse moving forward on us looking into the energy step code for Part 3 buildings. And the report outlined a lot of information on what we want to do. So when we do the consultation, we're probably going to look at Part 3, step 1 as the first step, and then moving up to higher steps as we go along. Again, we don't really know all the details yet for this work, and we're just seeking council's endorsement at this point for that.
So Ms. Wu,
Yes.
we're currently on single home residence in that, we're currently on step 3 now. Go ahead, we're on to step 4 now.
Yes.
I believe so.
so-
Let me just refer back.
For part 9 buildings.
And so the step, and that's where it stays now for whatever period of time.
Yeah, for quite a period of time, as we move up towards step 5.
And is that in sync with the rest of the corridors schedules? Have they also gone to step 4? Do you know? Can't remember.
I believe we're in line with at least Whistler and Squamish.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And so for the part 3 buildings, that would require then, just for clarity, that would require consultation to get into those 2 steps.
Correct.
Any questions from the committee? Are we endorsing and moving ahead with that consultation and that process to include part 3 in the step code, or yeah, part 3 into the step code?
It's actually one of the recommendations below.
Yeah, I just
Potentially.
wanted to maybe see if there was any discussion on that before we get into the recommendations. Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
I'm just wondering when we'll have time to comment on the details of this. Should we, bring up our comments now or just wait for a later time? How does that work?
No, I was just pulling that out just to make sure that if there are any questions around it, but we have 17 items, I believe, here. And once Ms. Wu's taken us through, then that'll be the time to provide comment on anything you'd like.
Okay.
So why don't I'll wait on the step code too then. So let's carry on, Ms. Wu.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back to any items at the end. We're almost there. Item 14, we are introducing a requirement for log homes. I think this is more to cover off because it's not exactly the part 9 residential buildings that we had originally intended. So this is to add on to the requirements to be step 3 instead of step 4, because it's not that easy to achieve step 4 for log homes. Item 15 is a new requirement on EV charging, but we feel that it's more catching up with industry because all the new homes that we are seeing, they are providing EV readiness already in the houses. So really this requirement in the bylaw now is really just to close the gap and even out the playing field, so to speak, on that item. Item 16 is just including a reference to climatic data. Currently, it's not in the bylaw. Item 17 is a list of all minor changes that are introduced with this bylaw. I'll quickly go through them. A lot of new definitions. We've taken out temporary buildings that was in the old bylaw. We just want to treat temporary buildings similar to all other buildings. We are charging for legal fees. So an admin provision to look after that. Geotech report requires for a site evaluation of the entire site, as opposed to just the lands where the houses sit on. And this is to cover off the hillside developments that we're seeing. Alternate solutions is a way where we are looking at the building code using a report by registered professionals, usually code consultants. So wording is introduced in this current draft to address how to accept alternate solutions. We have to reduce, item F is about a reduction in permit fee for registered professionals. We don't have a maximum amount right now, so $500 is proposed, and that's in line with a lot of other jurisdictions. Want to add a penalty clause of $1,000 for people who have done work without permit, or if stop work is done. So this is meant to be a deterrent for people who start work without the illegal work or work without permits. We have some exemptions to building permit requirements introduced, mainly for small tents and temporary cover shelter structures, and for low decks, which is more landscaping, and there's no risk, so to speak, for trip and fall kind of thing. So that's pretty much the bylaw. The bylaw itself has a lot of changes, but I've highlighted what I felt to be more the significant changes. So at this point, happy to answer any questions you have.
Much. Any questions before we get into comments? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
There we go. Thanks, Ms. Wu. Great report. I'm just wondering about the tents. Because if you look around the community, if you've had a chance to drive around, we see an awful lot of tents in people's front yards. Where do they come under in this situation? Do they need permits for those, or are they usually within your, what have you got, 10 square meter size?
Correct. So the current proposal is to exempt permit requirements of small tents. And usually, 10 square feet is referenced in the building code. The building code exempts any structures that's under 10 square meters, 100 square feet. So I'm old school that way. So we're just following suit on that. So if you see a tent that is bigger than 10 square meters, then technically they do need a building permit for it. A lot of these, and we also place a time limit on for up to 7 days, only because we don't want to be, dealing with the paperwork really, on dealing with very temporary. Someone might put up a tent for a wedding, or some that kind of thing. So we don't really want to be dealing with it and load up ourselves for unnecessary work. Tent permits are actually mainly, let's say they're permanent tents. Some people might want to put one up for sheltering the cars and that kind of thing. A lot of times it's not so much a structural requirements, because they can easily be tied down with sandbags and whatnot, but mainly more perhaps a zoning issue, depending on the zone that they're in, on setbacks and the sizes and so forth. So we want to kind of take a lot of that work out from staff on administering these kinds of permits. So currently we're proposing the two limits of under 10 square meters and a temporary 7-day duration. If council wants us to relook at that, we're happy to do it.
I guess the reason I bring it up, over the last number of years, we've seen a lot more tents come up in front yards because we don't have backyard alleys. And you see them an awful lot of them around the community. Some people even got 2 in their front yard. And I'm just not too sure that's the way we want a neighborhood to look. And it seems to become a major storage area. And in some places, the tents aren't exactly aesthetic looking. So that's why I bring it up. And I just want to understand what we're going to do with this going forward.
Thank you.
So those tents that I can add currently, they will require a building permit. And if they don't, then it becomes a bylaw enforcement issue.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll open it for comments then on what you see in front of you. Councillor Antonelli, did you want to lead off?
Yeah, I have a few comments. Just about the pools. There doesn't really seem to be a lot of middle ground there for the $200 above ground Canadian pool or Canadian Tire pool. So I'd like to make sure that we're not discouraging the use of those. This summer they were a lifesaver when it was 43 degrees or whatever. So I don't see a lot of provision in there for making it easy for people to install them. And so I saw in there, you need engineering. Maybe I didn't catch all the details, but engineering for the Canadian Tire pool would absolutely mean nobody gets a pool. So I think we really need to look at that and look at how we are encouraging the use of pools, not discouraging them. And I don't think the above ground pools have the same safety issues for, children falling in, because they have a ladder into them. About the expiring permit. So if a homeowner hasn't had an inspection for 12 months, the permit will expire. I don't really see how that encourages people to come in and work with the village to complete their work. So I would like to see something that's more encouraging and less discouraging. There's a lot of reasons why people might lapse for 12 months. Mostly financial. And so I don't think that's I don't think it's okay to just provide consequences to these people who might be struggling. The performance security for the provisional occupancy, I think that it misses the point a little bit, because if people want provisional occupancy, it's because they're struggling to complete their build. And so charging them more money at that point isn't a win for anyone. So I'd like that looked at, and look at how we can encourage people to build their homes rather than, I guess, put up barriers. Because as you know, building your home is the one way in Pemberton to get in there in a somewhat affordable manner. And then this is a larger issue, but I don't like the fee based on construction cost, because it basically introduces all this arbitrary cost. So for example, if you use expensive roof materials, your permit will cost more than someone who chose cheap roof materials. And it just goes on and on. I just don't see a correlation between the work of Village of Pemberton staff and the cost of the build. It's not a perfect correlation. And I would prefer to see it go to square feet. And so that's my comments for now. I would like to have more opportunity later to comment, but I assume that's all part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're going to provide input like you just did, and see what we want incorporated into the draft. And either if there's significant changes, then it'll come back to committee of the whole. If they're smallish, then I think they would come back to council with those changes. Is that a fair assessment of the process, Nikki, Ms. Gilmore? Okay. Any other comments?
Not for now.
Anyone else? How do we feel about the step code next steps in terms of part 3 buildings? It seems to me that personally, I'm in support of starting that process and introducing part 3 buildings into the step code and getting the consultation going to see what it looks like. Ms. Pedrini, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to clarify, when asked earlier where we were sitting in relation to Squamish and Whistler. So Whistler and Squamish are only at step 3. So Pemberton is more progressive than those two communities. However, Whistler does require step 4 for dense part 9 additions, and Squamish requires part 4 for part 3 wood frames and part 9 residential over 1,000 square feet. So anyways, we are a bit ahead of the other two communities, just to clarify.
Not in the part 3 category though.
Not in the part 3, we're not, we don't have any step code requirements as of yet, but this,
Yeah.
we would like to consider that.
Is there support for the starting that process from the rest of the committee? I see a few nodding heads. Yeah. Okay, so in a moment when we go into resolutions, we'll look for a motion to that effect. I think personally, most of the changes that you took us through, Ms. Wu, make sense to me. I appreciate some of Councillor Antonelli's comments. I'm not sure I agree entirely about the fees being based on square footage. I think that construction, if builders choose more complex construction because they have the budget and the desire, I think there is more work required from staff. So I lean more towards the current model of cost of construction, but I'm open to keep having that conversation as well. Ms. Padrini, go ahead.
I would like to clarify that, I think with AV's help. So again, it's not based entirely on the cost of construction. It is square footage based. But the cost of construction is determined by Marshall Swift. So maybe AV, you could explain that more in lay person's terms.
Sure. There are different ways of evaluating a building cost. Currently, we're using an evaluation tool called Marshall and Swift. It is a square footage base. They do have varying degrees of finishing to make it easier to understand, probably like a low, medium, high type of finishing and different rates assigned to it. So I think we're not trying to capture it to the dollar. I think staff is using a quick estimate, perhaps using the medium number and comparing it to what the builder is declaring. So the builder always comes in declaring a certain amount, and staff use the Marshall and Swift to quickly check it. So that's the first step when we're issuing the permit. As we go along and we see, that it could be more, or maybe they didn't include certain aspects of the building, the houses that should be included, we would try to adjust it with the clause at the very end of the construction. And these are they're not high cost per se. Building permit fees that support the entire system. I always call it as a system as a whole. So you do have the larger buildings, the larger permit fees supplementing the smaller permits. Sometimes, and Chris can tell you, like a deck can probably take up more time because you're dealing with somebody who's unsophisticated than a building that is supervised by engineers per se. So it's never exactly charged by the time that we spend. A system as a whole, it does balance out. So hopefully that answers a bit of a clarification on that construction cost. I want to just quickly touch base on the pools. It may not be understood what staff is intending. I think the ones where you inflate and fill with water and you play with it, and at the end of the day you drain it out, those are not part of the bylaw for the pools. We do not intend to even administer that. I think these are for the temporary pools, the Canadian Tire pools perhaps, that are filled with water and that could be a risk. I understand there could be a ladder or whatnot, but statistically, you just don't want to be that jurisdiction that have these accidents. So the idea is that we will be charging a minimum fee just so that we can track these pools for safety, for the fencing, for what they're doing and whatnot. Now, if they do drain it, then it's not an issue. And so that's the seasonal pools. For example, if they put a very large seasonal pool at a side of a cliff where the geotechnical safety could be an issue, that's another situation where we can advise them to move it back or move to somewhere where it's less risky. So those are all the reasons why we want to see permits for the seasonal pools. And staff will work with the homeowners on it. It's not intended to be onerous, but really more for us to be able to keep track and provide that extra pair of eyes for safety's sake.
Thank you. Ms. Padrini, did I see your hand?
You did, but AV covered my point.
Councillor Antonelli, follow up on that? Are you good?
So do those Canadian Tire pools require engineering?
Not if they place it in a location where there's no risk. So the only thing we'll check for is where where in the lot is, especially on hillside.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. We have a few recommendations in front of us. The first is that we provide input. I think that input's been received. The second is that the committee of the whole recommend to staff be directed to proceed with stakeholder consultation regarding referencing the Energy Step Code for Part 3 buildings. Would somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And the third is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that Chris Drouin be appointed to the position of plumbing official for the village. Moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. So again, with regards to the process here, we've provided some input. We see this draft bylaw at council next. What can we expect from here? Nikki?
I would suggest that we would bring it back. We'd obviously go and investigate any points that were raised and bring it back at a council setting. Of course, we just want to look at the timing as far as consultation, or do we put in provisions of certain dates? So with the Energy Step Code, that's some additional work that we need to do to see when it will exactly be coming back to council.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Wu, for your presentation. Thank you, Ms. Pedrini. We'll be seeing you later.
Okay, thank you.
And so now we're on to our delegation. We'll wait for Mr. Ringma to join us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ringma. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Glad you're here. We're happy to have you. And when you're all set to go, we're ready to hear your BC Transit update. We have 15 minutes, and that'll allow for some time for some discussion afterwards. And I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. I will share my screen here. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay, excellent. Can everybody see that presentation?
You bet.
Awesome, thank you. So good afternoon, Mayor Richmond, council members and staff. Much appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you again. Unfortunately, not in person. Would love to be up in Pemberton, up in the Ski to Sky corridor, but travel has been interesting lately. So into our agenda today, what I'd like to do is cover off the following topics. I'd like to give you a quick ridership update, talk about some key performance stats for the Pemberton Transit System, review our recently implemented free transit for children 12 and under program, talk a little bit about fare review and fare review options for Pemberton, and then just briefly recap regional transit, Sea to Sky Regional Transit, where it's at and hopefully where it's headed into the future. So this graph you see here outlines provincial ridership with kind of 3 years. So you've got 2019 ridership in green, 2020 ridership in red at the bottom, and this year's ridership in dark blue in the middle, with the weeks of the year across the bottom of the presentation. So what you can first see is clearly from the onset of COVID-19, which happened kind of late March and April of 2020, it had an immediate and lingering impact, a negative impact, I would say, to transit ridership across the province. In fact, the low point in ridership bottomed out back in April of 2020, where we took almost an 80% hit to ridership. Since that time, we've seen a steady and I would say slow and steady increase to that provincial ridership. And you'll also notice last year in September, we didn't get our traditional bump in September. Last year with COVID, post-secondary schools were not in class session. Lots of our high schools were kind of on modified schedules or half-day schedules. So we didn't see that bump. So good news is in 2021, we've seen that little bump that you can see in the graph there. And we've seen that continued pace, albeit a slow pace, of growth through this year. But provincially, we still are currently running about 35% off of our 2019 or pre-pandemic ridership levels. So still some work to be done. This graph here outlines the same kind of 3 timeframes, but it's very specific to the Pemberton local route, so the 100 route. You'll see some of the same trends in the pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic ridership, and that steep decline in April 2020, so it was felt here as well. But really the bright light here is the fact that in July of 2021, we actually surpassed our 2019 ridership levels. And that should really be highlighted and honestly celebrated, because there are not many systems across the province that have managed to reach or exceed 2019 levels at this time. So from a local ridership perspective, I'm really feeling good about the trend lines and where that service is headed. For the Pemberton commuter service, I've outlined the same 3 years. Interesting for the Pemberton commuter, you'll see that there's more pronounced swings in the commuter route in relation to seasonality and mainly seasonality in Whistler, with bumps at the start of the ski season, during the holiday season, and at the end of summer when Whistler is busy with multiple events. You'll also see at the start of 2021, ridership was well off the start of 2020. That dark blue line is fairly low. And that really had to do with mandatory travel restrictions in place. And as a result, the end of the Whistler Blackcomb ski season really suffered. But since then, the commuter service has seen that same slow and steady increases versus 2020. Although year-to-date ridership for the commuter is still about 18% off 2019 ridership levels. So if you remember the slide 2 ago, the provincial average is about 35. The Pemberton commuter is off 18. So technically bucking the trend of the provincial average, which again, I think is positive in light of all of the things we've had to encounter during COVID. I've placed a question mark at the end of this graph because that's really where the Pemberton commuter ridership, where it goes near the end of this year, will likely be affected by the ski season, Blackcomb opening, potential travel restrictions, and the future state of the COVID pandemic. So my hope is, as you see at the end of that graph, we get that lift in ridership. I'm hoping we have a pretty smooth sailing into the back part of the year, and the commuter continues to kind of follow the upper line there in blue. This is a bit of an eye chart, and I apologize for it, but it does give kind of a quick overview of the key performance statistics. And this slide compares BC Transit's last 2 fiscal years. And just to remind you, our fiscal years run from April to March. So the 2019-2020 stats that you see are basically pre-COVID, from April 2019 to March 2020. If you remember in the other graph, it was right at April 2020 where ridership really took a dive. The 2020-2021 stats cover the entire COVID pandemic from April 2020 through till this previous March 2021. So I've highlighted the key stats that I believe show how the pandemic affected the Pemberton transit system. And if you follow along with the numbers on the left, you'll see that at number 1, we saw a 37% decrease in ridership and a corresponding 44% decrease in revenue, associated revenue. And that's a result of the initial fear of COVID, those declines in ridership. We implemented rear door loading for a short period of time where there was no fare revenue collected. And COVID associated health orders and travel bans just really affected our ridership and the associated revenue. Also, as you're aware, from 2019 to 2020, we saw an increase in transit costs related to our efforts to stabilize your local transit service. And then there was also some additional COVID-related costs, such as increased cleaning costs that we undertook in order to provide safe and clean environment for our passengers. So if you look at the number 2, you'll see that these factors caused a 17.7% increase in transit-related costs in Pemberton. So when you take those 2 things together, you put decreased ridership and revenue and increased cost together, unfortunately, you arrive at number 3, which is a 94% increase in our operating cost per passenger and a decrease in cost recovery of about 54%. Now, with the increases we're seeing in 2021 to ridership on the local transit system, and hopefully with a strong winter ski season to prop up the commuter system, I feel fairly confident that these stats will improve in this current fiscal. It's clear that as an organization, BC Transit really needs to continue to support our transit systems and focus on ridership recovery, which obviously, if we can help promote that ridership, it'll help promote revenue. And those revenues are obviously one of the ways that the Village of Pemberton can use to reduce their overall costs of the transit system. So in the budget, 2021 budget, the province did commit to making transit more affordable for families, basically throughout the province. And one way to do that was by offering free fares for children up to and including the age of 12. And then on budget day, the minister made this promise a reality with confirmation that this program would be implemented in September. The province and BC Transit, and I think our local partners, all share an interest in building that culture of transit ridership and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Providing this program is expected to advance progress towards those objectives. And really, we want to provide some additional key benefits, such as increasing ridership with a younger demographic and encouraging family travel by bus. And also there's a big opportunity here to expose children to transit at a younger age, get them comfortable with transit, and hopefully create riders for life, which will hopefully impact over the long term that ridership cycle positively. We've done some estimations in this program, and it looks like the average family that utilizes transit would save around $500 per child per year in transit-related costs. In addition to this program, the province has also committed to provide funding to BC Transit for the benefit of our local government partners for the foregone fare revenue that's in conjunction with this program. So by lowering fares to zero, you may have recouped some fares. So there's a gap there, but the province is committed to filling that gap with a contribution agreement. And Pemberton will receive that added contribution towards your estimated fare revenue loss that you may or will incur as a result of offering this program. And that basically comes as a monthly stipend to your or discount to your invoices. So I want to talk a little bit about fare review. Staff had mentioned to me that council was interested in options when it came to fare reviews. And when I looked into it, the last fare review we completed was back in December of 2010. And I know personally that we had started a fare review process for Pemberton in 2020, but when the COVID pandemic hit, we froze all of those reviews across the province as our first priority really came to stabilizing ridership levels and operationally figuring out what we need to do in order to maintain our transit systems. Then the federal and provincial governments made the decision to support transit systems across BC by providing additional safe restart funding, which is great. Those resources obviously helped support our transit systems, but they did come with two fairly firm requirements. One was to maintain service levels, and that's to ensure consistency and reliability of transit systems across the province. And number two was they capped potential fare increases at 2.3% per year throughout the duration, the 3-year duration of the Safe Restart funding in order to maintain affordability. And if you look at that 2.3%, on your current local transit fare of $2.50, it really only equates to a 6-cent increase. So, typically when BC Transit works with our local government partners and we do fare increases, they would be in the 25-cent, 50-cent kind of range. So you can see significantly higher than the 2.3% that is allowable over the next 2 years. So in the meantime, we're seeing obviously these customer transit behavioral changes. There's some new technology advances that have encouraged BC Transit to look at revising our overall fare strategy while we wait for this requirement to lapse, and that work is currently ongoing. But I've let our sales and revenue team know that Pemberton should be at the top of our list of systems in line for a fare review once the Safe Restart requirement ends. And they've committed that they could have Pemberton begin a full fare review in early 2023. So I've got you on the list. I'm working with the sales and revenue team. I know it might not be as quickly as the Village of Pemberton might want to have that review completed, but it is the timeline that we're currently working with. And my last slide is just a bit of an overview on regional transit, just to refresh everybody where we've been and kind of where we're at. Again, BC Transit did complete Sea to Sky transit corridor study in 2017. The local transit committee then actually was formed in 2018. That local committee did work to establish a Sea to Sky Regional Transit Commission that was approved by BC Transit and the BC Transit Board. So there is kind of that governance model that's in place. But funding options were explored with the province in 2019, but ultimately agreement was not reached. And the positions on that board or sort of that committee were never appointed. Then COVID hit, and we know all the effects and all the after effects that have affected not only local governments but BC Transit and the province. But I think with 2021, there is that renewed optimism from the committee, and just some discussions I've had with some of my contacts within that committee, for the committee and the province to reopen discussions. And I know there were some good discussions at UBCM last week. And, at the end of the day, the Sea to Sky governments, the province, and I think BC Transit are all aligned to the many benefits of regional transit. Those obviously include fewer single-use vehicles on the road. That'll help with greenhouse gas emissions and also to reduce congestion. That would allow us to save some dollars in terms of costly upgrades to the Sea to Sky Highway just to handle increased congestion. There's clearly an opportunity to further truth and reconciliation by connecting First Nation communities to work, family and health services through transit services. And ultimately, this Sea to Sky Regional Service has a great opportunity to create economic opportunity throughout the region by increasing mobility and community connectedness through that corridor. So from a BC Transit perspective, we're currently reviewing our current service options that we kind of worked on back in that kind of 2017 to 2019 period. And we're comparing them to some of the changes we've seen in transit and travel demand in the region. Again, COVID obviously has had some effects. We're trying to analyze and look at the different effects that would have, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are well positioned to support local government and the province when an agreement on governance and funding for this service is reached. So, from our perspective, our role is really to have those service options and really have some detailed data and analysis, so that when that committee and the province come to more firm agreement, that we're able to quickly activate options as they are available. And that is it for me. Looks like I was right on 15 minutes. I apologize. I still hope we have some time for some questions.
We do. Thank you so much for your presentation. That's really helpful. I mean, I think the start, the numbers at the beginning and the graphs paint a picture of what we've been and Transit's gone through over the last year and a half, 2 years. But I guess the positive news is our transit seems to be recovering in ridership ahead of the provincial curve, and I guess that shows strength in our system. So that's great. I'll open it up to questions. Any questions from the committee? No questions? One thing I would maybe bring up, you finished with the regional transit bit there, Robin, and as you work with the province and ourselves, the partners trying to bring regional transit, one of my concerns, so the province at this point is committed to doing another demand type study for the corridor, and that's one of the first steps in their minds moving ahead with regional transit. And one of my concerns has been and now continues to be that this study will show obviously more demand in the southern part of the corridor, and that the province chooses to help support and help fund our regional transit, incrementally pushing its way up the highway coming up north. When we set out as partners in the regional transit committee and striving towards a commission, we did that as a corridor from Lewa right down to Squamish Nation and all the municipalities in between. We set out as a group to do that, to develop a regional transit system, not an extension of, not a slow progression, a regional one that went all the way from Mount Currie down to Vancouver. And so one of my concerns is that it gets piecemealed a little bit, and that this study will show greater demand over in the southern part, and therefore that's where we have to put our focus to start. I always like to remind people that we're the only ones that actually provides regional transit currently in the Sea to Sky corridor. So I'm going to make sure that we don't get left out on that. And as you work with the province and us, I just want to put that thought in your head. You've worked with us for a number of years. You know how important the transit is to us. So I look for your support on that conversation when we have it.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for your comments. And what I would say is, I work very closely with our planning team who works on developing those service options, and I will make sure to communicate to them your desire again to look at the regional system as a whole. Again, I totally agree with you. I think, just in the numbers I just reviewed, Pemberton is obviously showing strong appetite for transit. I'm hearing it from local residents as well. I think with the Watt study and some consultation that was done on behalf of the SLRD, we also got some really good feedback from transit riders in the region. And yeah, I will continue to advocate for that, for Pemberton and that regional transit service that connects all the communities.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from the committee? All right, well, seeing none, thank you again for the presentation. It's very helpful information. It's good to know we're rebounding, and hopefully we continue to recover and fill our buses.
Yeah.
We're fairly locked in terms of our fare review. There's not a lot of decision making there. So yeah, thanks for the presentation, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to presenting in person in the near future.
Same.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ron. Take care. Okay. Number 6, the last item on the committee of the whole, electronic meetings, response to COVID-19 legislated changes. Ms. Kennedy is going to take us through this.
Good afternoon, Committee of the Whole. Thank you for taking the time to hear my report. And the purpose of this report is to present for the committee's consideration information regarding the use of remote and hybrid electronic meeting formats after the end of the tenure of Ministerial Order M192, and to seek the committee's direction respecting the potential future use of these meeting formats. Since April 2020, first under the authority of M083 and subsequently under M192, the village has conducted council, committee, and commission meetings electronically with all participants attending remotely through the Zoom platform. But with the end of the term of M192 comes the decision point regarding the future use of electronic meeting formats. So under Bill 10, Municipal Affairs Statutes and Amendments Act, which comes into effect on September 29th, Council may add provision for electronic meetings to a council procedures bylaw and may specify the conditions and circumstances under which these formats will be allowed. Hybrid and remote electronic meetings offer undisputed advantages with respect to accessibility and transparency if meetings are managed such that all participants have equal opportunity to hear and be heard. But if the meeting platform and technology are cumbersome, unreliable, or not capable of ensuring that all participants, whether attending in person or remotely, are treated equally, then the format will fail to achieve its purpose. Thus, technological considerations will necessarily inform decisions regarding the future use of electronic meeting formats. The province's publication, the guidance for adapting to the new electronic meetings framework, provides questions to consider when amending a procedure bylaw to permit electronic meetings. And the questions with staff answers where appropriate are attached as Appendix C to the report. The committee may wish to review the questions and to supplement staff's answers. For simplicity, the report presents 3 options for consideration and notes the actions required to achieve each. Option 1, which is a return to pre-COVID in-person meetings, requires no action. Option 2, which calls for return to in-person meetings, but adds recording, broadcasting, and limited remote participation, would not require an amendment to the Council Procedures Bylaw number 788/2015, but would require an electronic meetings policy and technology upgrades. And option 3, allowing hybrid and electronic meetings, would necessitate a bylaw amendment, a new electronic meetings policy, and hardware upgrades. To provide the committee with some information as a starting point, staff tested the hybrid meeting format in council chambers using the Zoom platform, with each participant joining the Zoom webinar on a personal laptop computer, whether in council chambers or whether attending from a remote location. The test revealed the need for hardware upgrades to avoid a situation where some meeting participants may not be clearly seen and heard, or may not be able to see and hear other participants clearly. Setting up the meeting was cumbersome due to the need to ensure that all in-person participants disconnected their personal audio feed to avoid audio feedback. Another drawback of this format is the need for participants to run the Zoom webinar on their own devices, necessitating switching to another window to view the agenda or other documents. One positive observation was that the large screen in council chambers allows those seated facing the screen to see and hear the meeting, but unfortunately the room configuration is such that some attendees and participants will not have a full view of the screen. Overall, the staff consider that although it is possible to hold hybrid meeting formats in council chambers without investing in video conferencing equipment, the experience would likely prove to be both frustrating and unsatisfying for some participants and attendees. Fortunately, there are many video conferencing hardware solutions that integrate with major meeting platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams that would eliminate many of the problems that staff noted in the test. The SLRD has installed a 360-degree OWL camera with multiple microphones and a separate ceiling-mounted camera and microphone unit in their boardroom, but unfortunately staff were not able to see or test the new system before this meeting. Staff noted also that in addition to the lack of suitable video conferencing hardware, the size and shape of council chambers presents its own challenges, as it is not conducive to easily capturing video and audio feed from all present, and to displaying the video feed to all attendees, or to maintaining a physical separation between staff and council and the public. As well, placement of a physical barrier such as plexiglass between the public and meeting participants that would eliminate a need for masks during meetings would be problematic. Thus, under the current public health order, all in-person attendees and participants would be required to wear masks when anyone other than staff and council is present in council chambers, which would add to the challenge of ensuring that all meeting participants are clearly heard. Staff are suggesting for consideration be given to placing a portable trailer on the village's property that could be configured and equipped to provide the best possible meeting experience for in-person and remote participants and for the public. And the trailer could also be used as an office space, permitting more staff to return to work in the office after a year and a half of working from home. So there are 4 recommendations attached to this report. Number 1, that the Committee of the Whole provides direction regarding facilitating electronic and hybrid meetings after September 28th, 2021. Number 2, that the Committee of the Whole provides comment on amending Council Procedures Bylaw number 788/2015 to permit Council, Committee, and Commission meetings to be held electronically, subject to specified conditions. Number 3, that the committee recommends to council that staff be directed draft an amendment to Council Procedures Bylaw number 788/2015 to permit electronic attendance at council, committee, and commission meetings for review at a future Committee of the Whole meeting. And recommendation number 4, that the Committee of the Whole recommends to council that staff be directed to present at a future meeting of council recommendations for meeting space along with suitable hardware and software for the facilitation of electronic meetings. This concludes my report. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kennedy. That's a great report. Can you tell me or us the difference in technology requirements between option 2 and option 3?
Yes. So for option 2, we would be keeping the same procedures bylaw. So remote attendance and participation will be limited. Councillors would be able to attend remotely through just for up to 2 meetings, I believe, or up to 2 councillors and up to 4 times a year. There would be no difference in the technology requirements, though. It would be essentially the same, that we would still want to be able to broadcast and record meetings. And under option 2, those who could attend remotely without restriction would be some staff and delegations and the public. So there'd be no difference in technology. It's
Great.
just a difference in the bylaw.
Okay, thanks. Let's open it for questions and we'll wait for comments. Do we want to flush any questions out? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Ms. Kennedy. I don't see anywhere in here that we've talked about COVID, staff that aren't inoculated or requiring people coming to meetings to present their medical pass, and people that may be on councillor staff that aren't getting vaccinated. They'll have no choice but to be on electronic meetings.
Ms. Gilmore.
Actually, at this point, there are no requirements for people attending council meetings to show proof of vaccine, and nor does the village have a policy or a mandate to require staff or council members to be vaccinated. So there would be no provisions, and members of the public and staff could attend regardless of their vaccination status.
So therefore, that's why I'm bringing it up. We have to put a policy in place because there may be some people on council staff that will not attend if we don't have full compliance.
Unfortunately, that is something that does require legal review. And it's not something that it will take some time to consider from a human rights and employment standard perspective, from an organizational perspective.
Then I think we better start that process, because if the dates that I see that Ms. Fraser has sent out looking at us attending in the White Building starting next month come into place, I want to make sure that anybody on council or staff feels comfortable attending, knowing that people are properly meet the proper requirements under the Health Act.
Okay, if I can just make two comments. One, we would need obviously a resolution of council if this is the direction that the village would be proceeding. And number two, we need to confirm whether or not that's something we can actually do, which we have had initial conversations about. So we would need some more. We've already had some discussions, and we can have follow-up and more detailed. But I think we would need to definitely have certainty from everyone that that's the direction they want to go.
Yeah, there's definitely limitations as to when you could put those restrictions on, because you can't restrict people's right to work through the vaccination policy unless they are in certain industry or certain industry size where the risk to communicate the disease is that much higher, and you can't restrict people's access to government as well. I still think it's worth having a review and getting a smarter assessment on that than mine, but I know that those are definitely barriers to being able to require that. But let's have a motion, if the rest of the committee is okay, to have staff get a legal opinion on whether and how we would be able to ask for proof of vaccination to attend council meetings. Yeah, move around.
I think there's other people have their hands up, so I'll wait until we hear.
I'm putting that up for discussion. So if you want to move it, then I could open it in the seconder.
Yeah, I'll bring it up for discussion.
Have a seconder. Councillor Zant, discussion, go ahead. Councillor Antonelli.
I don't think it's within our power to make people disclose their vaccine status before they attend a council meeting or go to work. I understand where Councillor Craddock is coming from. Sure, everyone wants to be safe, but it's not something that I would support. I think it's just kind of a barrier for people to, and as far as I know, we don't have that ability to, make sure people disclose this personal information. So I'll just leave it at that.
Further discussion.
Mayor Richmond.
Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
Just in regards to what Councillor Craddock, I think, just be careful. I think that's part of what Councillor Craddock's getting at, is just to do this review to find out where we do stand. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So I agree with what Councillor Antonelli is saying, but I think part of this motion is just to figure out where exactly we do stand, what we can and cannot ask for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion is not to move ahead and put that into policy. It's to find out what
Just research.
Yeah, just to know what those options actually are, and it gives us the information to answer in case other people have that same question, if nothing else.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
And just to follow up with that, the federal government has put it in place for federal employees. A lot of the health units in Alberta and BC now put it in place. So I'm not sure why we're saying we can't do it if the provincial and federal governments can do it. But it's something that, yes, I think the review will bring out, and then it'll be interesting to see what that review brings out. But then at the end of the day, this is all going to come out to each one of us, whether it be staff or council, feeling comfortable attending meetings if we're not knowledgeable about other people showing up.
Councillor Antonelli, did I see your hand there?
No, sorry, someone just came to the door.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
May I make a
go
comment on
ahead.
the PHO? On the current health order, it's specific that council meetings are exempt under the current, the order that there is for vaccine, proof of vaccine to attend meetings.
And then, so I think at this point, having a motion just to have that confirmation, so we have that information is a good motion to support in my mind. And then if there is the need or desire to have a conversation, whether we want to look at making, if we had the ability to make a policy, we could have a look at it. But I think this does inform perhaps some of the options that we're looking at here, because option 3 offers a hybrid model where if there are members of council or staff that aren't comfortable, then we do have the ability to do a hybrid model where they can zoom in. As we heard from Ms. Kennedy, the technology we have right now doesn't allow for it comfortably, but that's what we could move towards quite easily. So, you know, we might not, I don't think we're gonna have a conversation here today about whether there should be a vaccine passport to attend a meeting. It sounds like the PHO doesn't allow for it anyway. But I think it does factor into the conversation, maybe to consider option 3 if we like. Go ahead, Councilor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor Richmond. I guess part of the reason bringing this up is Ms. Kennedy has in a report that a counselor could only attend a maximum of 4 times a year. And we have some 21 or 22 meetings a year. If somebody chooses not to come because they don't know what the public situation is, that's going to be pretty awkward for anybody that doesn't feel comfortable. So I guess that's the number that I'm talking about. We need to take a look at that and see if that's respective for the community.
That's why option 3 would include starting the process to amend our procedures bylaw so that wasn't the number, that isn't the restriction on that. That recommendation would include that. Go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
I just wanted to follow up on that because your procedure bylaw, you can establish how you want in terms of your attendance and your electronic meeting, the number of people who can attend electronically, the number of times in a year they may do so. So that's one of the things that staff were looking at, getting feedback from council and the committee with respect to what they might be agreeable to. It's not, right now our bylaw is maximum of 2 people, maximum of 4 times a year, but that was under the previous way we did business, where you would be attending by telephone, which was often, I certainly heard feedback from council members that it's awkward and cumbersome, and now that technology has changed and we're all used to using it, it's the government has amended the legislation to allow for this hybrid model to be more, but it's up to council to sort of decide what they want in terms of how many members of council you would like to have who could attend electronically. One of the things that is important to know too, that Ms. Kennedy did put in the report, is that under our current procedure bylaw, the presiding officer, or the chair, is not able to attend electronically. So they must be in person. So that's something too that a number of councils are adjusting to allow everybody, including the presiding officer, to attend electronically, so that nobody is required to be in person. So these are just a few things that we're trying to flesh out from council and get some feedback on.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Gilmore.
And I just wanted to mention that obviously we're in a bit of this quagmire situation because we aren't able to go ahead and amend our procedure bylaw until the provincial government had made their changes. And that puts us in a place where we need notification to bring forward any changes to the procedure bylaw, plus the 2 meetings for reading. So everybody, well, actually all other municipalities are in the same situation, which makes it awkward for the upcoming, especially October meetings, if we are to make any changes from the attendance, electronic attendance. So it's not clean. And unfortunately, there wasn't any way we could bring it earlier, or we would have.
So at this point, to Ms. Gilmore's point, the October 5th meeting would require at least 3 members of council in attendance in person, only 2 people attending electronically, and the presiding officer would have to be, or the presiding member would have to be in person. So we have to come up with some element that will work for that meeting. And as Ms. Kennedy noted, our attempts were a little clunky.
So let's keep breaking this down part by part. I think it's well laid out in the report and the recommendations. But right now we have a motion on the table. Let's clean that one up. A motion on the table to have staff get legal opinion on what we can and cannot do with regards to proof of vaccination. Any further, just go ahead, Ms. Gilmore.
Was that staff or just the public? Or are we going to do a separate motion? Because there was some discussion about a policy. So does that include everybody? Because right now it's talking about the
I would
public,
think
and
so, yeah.
I
No,
would say, pardon?
I would say everybody.
Public,
Okay,
public and staff,
Yeah.
public council and staff.
Yes.
Yes.
okay.
Okay, and if I can just clarify, this is a committee of the whole recommends to council that, okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so with regards to the options, well, first of all, are there any more questions to flesh out on the three options that are presented? Go ahead, Councilor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry to drag this out, but I want to be very clear about which recommendation is going to allow us to open up council staff to be in participation by Zoom rather than in camera.
Option 3 provides that. So option 1 was the old status quo. Option 2 is the old status quo, but we have the ability to broadcast and record so people can see the whole thing live and after the fact. No changes to the council procedures bylaw. Option 3 is a hybrid, which allows council and staff to a certain level to attend electronically, as well as the public. And that requires an amendment to our procedures bylaw, which we will, if we go with option 3, we will initiate that process here today. So to answer your question, option 3 is the one that provides that option. that opportunity. Go ahead.
If I can just be, just provide a little bit of clarity, option 2, although it doesn't require an amendment to our procedures bylaw, it does limit the number of members who can attend and the number of times. So it would be a matter of council working out a schedule.
So if we were to go to option 3, as Sheena said earlier, we would, for the next meeting, we would still be under the procedure bylaw as written, and therefore 3 of us would have to attend live, including myself, the chair, until we get the amendment to our procedures bylaw through that process, which will take a few meetings. But for the long-term fix or the mid to long-term fix, option 3 is the one that would allow for people to have the option to attend electronically. Council, staff, go ahead.
No, I guess what I wanted to follow up with, that clarifies for council. What does it clarify for staff and the public?
Same, option 3 would provide the opportunity for staff and public to attend electronically.
But we do, just under the legislation, we are required to have a location, an identified location where the public can come and sit in person and watch the meetings. So presumably, so if that is the case, then if we had a meeting room where some members of council could attend or all attend electronically, we have to have a screen where the public can come into a room, see everybody, hear everybody, and be able to engage as part of in part of the discussion at the open question period or whatever. That one of the challenges with that one is that under the legislation, an officer of the municipality must be in attendance at that room. So if we went electronically and we had everybody preferring to attend electronically, which under option 3 would be one option, we would still have to have either myself, Ms. Gilmore, or our finance officer, once that person is online, in the meeting room where the public can also attend and see and hear and watch and participate. So by doing option 3, if you have the hybrid, we would have an ATCO trailer where the public could come, council could come, but it'd be a bigger space. So there'd be more space to give people room. And I think people would feel more comfortable. People could attend by electronic means, or they could attend in person. And either myself, Ms. Gilmore, or the finance manager would have to be in attendance in that room.
And just to follow up, Mayor Richmond again, do we feel we're going to have that in place in 3 weeks? For our first meeting, October 5th, which is slated for the White Building.
No, that's
And
why
are
we're,
No.
no, that's why we will have to go with the existing procedures bylaw for at least the next meeting. If
No,
not the
2
next-
meetings.
If not the next
Two.
2 meetings.
Mhm.
Okay,
Unless we get direction and we're able to advertise in time to be able to bring it to the October, bring any amendments to the bylaw to the October 19th meeting. We would be looking at November 2nd before we could get the bylaw passed.
thank you.
I've got Councillor Antonelli, and then I think I've got Councillor Zant.
Yeah, I think we should be making revisions to our bylaw to allow for electronic, attendance for perpetuity and for however much people want to use it. I think it's worked really well, and I think the public has really appreciated it. So I haven't heard any complaints about that might lead me to think that, a counselor should only have an opportunity to go 4 times a year. Yeah, so I think we should open it up. I think this is the future, and it would be going backwards to and insist that everybody's in the same room. I'm not in favor of an ATCO trailer. It just sounds expensive and not a great solution. So I think if we need an interim measure, I would be looking for something to rent an existing space or something along those lines. So I find the recommendations just a little bit confusing. I'm not sure quite which recommendation captures that.
Well, okay, and we could always break the recommendations down if you want to split out some of the items. With regards to the other locations, my question for staff on that one was, I know there was some discussion with the SLRD about using their boardroom. Why did those discussions not go any further?
So at this point, they are not certain whether or not they are going to be renting out their room. In addition, they are requiring their IT staff member to run the whole meeting. That will be another, because of the camera, all of the microphones, it's not something that staff around the council table will be able to manage, which will actually most likely apply to our situation as well. It's a little bit more technical than obviously a Zoom meeting. So there would also be additional costs. The renovations that they've done at the regional district are different, so that you can't lock off the component of the boardroom. It's actually now incorporated as part of their office space. So they would we'd have additional costs as well to have staff stay there and monitor and close up for the meeting. So at this point, they haven't even run through one of their meetings to say whether or not that's an option in the future, potentially. We've actually also explored, could we use a room at the community center, but the AV audiovisual technology that we have is going to be installed. It's not going to be movable. So when we pick a location, that's going to have to be the location. So the reason for bringing, it doesn't have to be an ATCO trailer per se. It would be, there are many different office type trailers that could consider, but at this point, we most likely will need to be considering that, whether or not that's for staff or whether or not that would be for council chambers. So just because we do need some more room as an interim to get everybody back, or at least somewhat back, even sharing desks, those types of things, that we are going to need more room. So that was one of the options that we put on here now. If we're going to outfit it, let's outfit the room that will be sort of the more permanent area.
No, and I see the logic in that for sure. I want to continue having the conversation with the SLRD. Our staff is going to have to learn the technology no matter where we put it. So we're going to have to figure out what that looks like and if there's added cost, staffing cost as a result of this. You know, we talk a lot at the board table about sharing services and saving each other's municipalities costs and redundancies. You know, Tuesday nights are pretty open there as far as I know. So I got you, Sheena. So I would
Letter
like-
from council potentially?
Pardon me? I would like to, I have a letter from council or some way for me to bring it to the board table to have a conversation to make sure that staff continue to work with you, that SLRD staff continue to work with you on that, because I think I would definitely get board support for that. And if it's, you know, too complicated and convoluted, then it doesn't work. But I want to make sure we flushed it out because it's right down the street. If it's outfitted for it and we could rent it, you know, there's some costs there, but it sounds like there's going to be costs no matter what. And the other side of it in terms of the trailer and all that is, you know, that's a much bigger picture discussion that I'm leery of having right here now, because, you know, it brings into the whole, well, how realistic is it that we're going to build a new municipal hall anytime soon? Is this an answer to bridging the next 10, 15 years so that we could put staff in the white building and then have a third building that has our chambers in it? Maybe, but that's a really big budget and future thinking conversation. So I don't know how well it fits here, but I understand why it's here. Sheena, go ahead.
Oh, no, just one of the challenges with the SLRD building is that they couldn't guarantee we would be able to use the room during the daytime on Tuesdays. Because our second meeting of the month is, you know, we're 9 a.m. through to middle of the afternoon. Our meetings, our evening meetings start at 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And that was identified as something that they were not able to commit to. So
And again, that's what and maybe that's the case. Maybe it doesn't work, but I want to know that we've tried because it's the most economical and, in my mind, logical and quick resolution to this, even if it's a temporary thing, even if that gives us the time to now look at outfitting our own trailer or new building or new hall or whatever it is direction we decide to go. It could just be a bridge. So I don't know what the best way, if the rest of council, the committee is happy to make a recommendation to council that I bring it to a future board meeting for discussion. Just to keep that conversation going. Is that something somebody would like to do?
I'll make that motion.
Seconder, Councillor Noble, any further discussion on that? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so back to exploring option 1, 2, or 3. I feel like I feel like I'm hearing support for option 3 to allow electronic attendance. Go ahead, Councillor Zan.
Yeah, I was just throwing my support behind option 3 as well. One point I wanted to bring up specifically is in 1 year's time, that the fact that we could hold meetings completely electronically would be a good avenue for other people to maybe want to run for office. There's some people in Penryn that have significant daycare issues, and this being able to run electronically is just one more thing to say, hey, this is now available to you. So you could do this if you want to because we have electronic meetings. So yes, like I said, I support option 3. I just want to make that point. Thank you.
No, I think that's a good point as well. I do, you know, just play the devil's advocate a little bit on this. I do feel that, you know, it's something that we would want to check in on again by allowing completely electronic participation. I don't feel that anybody at the table would do that, but it does allow for people to disengage a little bit and participate less than others. You know, I like to have the ability within our procedures bylaw in case, as Councillor Craddock said earlier, there's people that don't feel safe under current health circumstances. We have that ability, you know, as things normalize and hopefully we don't have these sorts of concerns. You know, I would worry that the policy would open the door to some sort of lack of participation or disengagement by council members or staff. So it's something I would want to review to see that council feels that it's working after a number of months to make sure that we like it. But, you know, I like in general the direction of being able to broadcast and allow participation from residents by doing this, I think is a huge plus for our residents. And there are funds available right now through the Restart Recovery to be able to look into that technology. So we have funds that don't come from our taxpayers base, our tax base there to be able to make that next step. So I think that's pretty timely. So to go back up to the recommendations. We've kind of, they kind of morph into each other a little bit. So should we go for recommendation 3? Committee of the Whole recommends to council that staff be directed to draft an amendment to council procedures bylaw 788 to permit electronic attendance at council committee and commission meetings for review at a future Committee of the Whole meeting. Somebody like to make that recommendation? Or make that motion, sorry. Councillor Antonelli, seconded by Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the 4th recommendation is that Committee of the Whole recommends to council that staff be directed to present at a future council meeting of council recommendations for meeting space along with suitable hardware and software for the facilitation of electronic meetings. Moved by Councillor Zant, second. Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. We've also already passed the resolutions to recommend the council to get a legal opinion on proof of vaccination, as well as to continue the conversation about sharing or renting the boardroom at the SLRD. Do we need any other of those 2 recommendations or anything else from you, Sheena? Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if council or if the committee could provide us a little bit of guidance of whether you're wanting this to just be electronic across the board, everybody can attend, there are no limits, or do you, I mean, one of the things for sure is that the chair, I would guess that the chair be allowed to attend electronically for sure is one item. Do you want to look at putting some limits on it, or the number of people, or just anything that?
Yeah. Some guidance.
I realize.
Yeah, no,
yeah, I mean, we can certainly draft a bylaw that, but it kind of helps us. We're obviously going to be seeking some legal advice and support on how we properly word it, because all of the municipalities are grappling with this. And so the more that we can sort of understand what councils.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, to be clear, we're drafting, or we're making amendments to the procedures bylaw to allow for a new future, as Councillor Antonelli put it, as into new options, as well as safety considerations that Councillor Craddock put up. So I think it's something that's going to be, take us into the midterm, and again, we'll review it. But I say that in that it's not, if there's really dire circumstances like the pandemic and the state of emergency, then we'll be given other abilities to once again change how we do business. And the reason I say that is because, to answer Ms. Fraser's question, I prefer a hybrid, but I think that there should always be a couple people in attendance, and their ability, as we said, for residents to come in and participate. So I'm not sure that I want the procedures bylaw to allow for all 5 members of council to participate electronically. Go ahead, Sheena.
So currently under our procedures bylaw, we do have a clause in there which we brought in because of the ministerial orders and everything that was happening in April, April to June 2020, whereby in the event of an emergency, a state of emergency for health, flooding, and there's one other, we can hold it electronically, and we would support, from a staff standpoint, we would support keeping that in place, because that would then allow council, if we're in a state of emergency, whether it's a local state of emergency that's declared by the municipality or one that's declared by the province under certain criteria, then everybody just attends electronically, and that's the way it works. So I would not be inclined to remove that because that's specific to what you were referring to. If we do get in a bad situation again, it's trying to do the day-to-day. It's creating the language around the day-to-day.
So a question for the committee then, do we, in introducing these changes, are we trying to allow for a council member to attend all, whatever it is, 20 meetings a year electronically, or do we put a limit on that? You know, prior, you know, it used to be 4. Is it 10? Is it 12? I don't know. And is there a total number of people that we want to have in person? Is it 0? Is it 2? Is it 3? So let's put those 2 questions to give to staff to work with when they draft this. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Councillor Noble.
Maybe instead of the old thing where you had 4 that you could do electronically, we could have that as a minimum to do in person.
So you have to attend a minimum of 4 meetings physically a year. That's just okay. Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I don't think that this should be something that, you know, somebody's counting and monitoring and reporting out on. I think that kind of goes back to our old system of like reporting on those kind of things. And I don't think it's very comfortable for people because everybody has their own reasons. I do like Councillor Noble's idea of putting in there that, you know, we're encouraged to attend at least 4 in person a year. I mean, maybe it could even be a higher number, but I think it should be encouraged. And then there's no policing aspect to it, because I definitely see the value of coming in to the hall. But the idea of it being tallied and reported out on, I don't think it's very, it's not encouraging for people to sign up for this system.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on number? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, putting a number on it is a really tough thing to do. I certainly would prefer to see us all in chambers, and especially for the public when they attend meetings, because there's a lot of things that on Zoom, you don't see body language, you don't see other interactions. And, you know, I think it's really important that those that are elected are available to the community, not just on Zoom. So I'm not too sure that I'm able to put a number on it right now. I think 4 is way too few meetings to attend in person. But is it, like you said, Mayor, is it 6? Is it 12? I don't know. I'm really having a tough time with that. And I mean, we can leave it up to the discretion of council, but at the same time, that could mean somebody just decides, well, I don't want to drive into town tonight, so I'm going to spend the rest of my time at home. And I don't think that's conducive to good meetings and making decisions either. So it's a tough one. I mean, right now we're making everybody attend by Zoom. Previously, everybody attended in person. So what's the number? I don't know. I don't think we can come up with a number.
Yeah, I hear you. And I agree with a lot of your thoughts. I feel that it's really important to have a certain amount of in-person attendance. I think the relationship we build as a council changes the way we work together, and just always working on a screen together does not allow for you know, a lot of that interaction that's important to, I think, coming together to make good decisions. So I agree. I think there should be, you know, if we have the ability, and we sign up, we have the ability to come in, we should come in and we should be live, and that should be part of our commitment. I also do want to open the door for, as Councillor Zant says, a parent or somebody to be able to work from home and be able to do that, and open the door to more people to participate in local politics. So I agree with you. It's tough to pick a number, but I think that's the only way to really, you know, we're going to send staff back to amend our procedures bylaw. We got to give them a number of some sort to work with. It can't be a vague statement that, you know, come when you can. And that's also why I said I think there should be, at the end of this, a motion to review the council procedures bylaw in X amount of months to make sure what these changes we're making are working and that we're having effective meetings. So I want to make sure that we review it, because we are, to a certain degree, picking an arbitrary number. So hard to pick a number. I agree. I would say, you know, maybe it's the language is better, at least half. You know, at least half of the council meetings, unless presented with, you know, other extenuating circumstances, a council member must attend at least half of scheduled council meetings during the course of the year, something like that.
Well, we can work with that. We can also, you know, see what other communities are doing and look into, now that if we've got something, it helps us to flesh out.
Okay, let's do that. Let's start with that as a starting point. Let's call it at least half of the meetings have to be in purpose. And when you bring this back, this will have given council a chance to think about it more. You can see what other communities are doing, maybe have some more options. What about in terms of how many members of council need to be live? Is that, or in person? Is that a number we want to pick as well?
You mean live as in being in the council chambers?
Yeah, so there's 5 of us on council. Should at least 2 of us be there? For the, you know, should at least 3 of us? I don't know how that works. Now we got a bit of a juggle. All of a sudden, 3 council members say they can't make it. The snowstorm. I don't know. So I don't know.
So under the current bylaw, if you need to have a minimum of 3 members to have quorum to make it work. But under what they're proposing is that quorum concern is no longer there. So it could be that, you know, all of a sudden people are stuck and they need to attend electronically. They could do that at the last minute if, you know, with the bylaws changed. So it's trying to, if you set a number that, you know, a certain number of people have to be in the council chambers, certain number of council members have to be, and then something comes up and they can't all be there, then you can't hold your meeting. Or unless we put language in the bylaw that says you can still have quorum. But it kind of, that you could have quorum if everybody attends electronically, but you need to have 2 people in the council chamber.
Is it worth also having a check on this one to see what other communities are looking at before we try to reinvent it?
Absolutely.
The other thing we may want to consider is spacing, and that may also give us a number, at least in the interim, about how many people could be in a given room. Of course, that depends where we're holding the meeting, because there'd be different sizes and different rooms.
Okay. Is that sufficient input, Sheena, Gwendolyn, as to do your work?
Yeah, does the committee want to, would the committee be interested in preparing a bit of a resolution around these points?
So resolution to bring back the council procedures bylaw, considering at least half of the meetings, council members have to be in person. And that staff be directed to review what other communities are doing in terms of quorum and attendance. We can bring it back. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Anything else somebody wants to add to that? Go ahead, Councilor Craddock.
I guess with that, the only concern I have, until we get the ability to run meetings with full cameras, microphones, and Zoom included in in-person meetings, where are we going?
Until that happens, we are going to be carrying on with the current procedures bylaw. At least 3 of us in attendance in the White Building, and
all the meetings in Zoom?
That's one of our challenges.
Well, we would have to be. We don't have a choice, because if 2 people stay home, they're on Zoom. We can't run a meeting with 2 people on Zoom and the rest of us in council, can we? That's a question I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
We will need to bring back some of that information. Again, it might be really clunky, unfortunately, but it will be what we have to do so that the public can attend and council and staff can attend.
I mean, we can go back to, you know, if a few members of couple members of council do not want to attend physically next meeting, they can call in, and we could stick with the old technology until we figure this out. So it's not on Zoom.
And then the public would need to come in physically and wouldn't be able to watch.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have any recording.
Yeah.
We still can, and we can't record if we have all mics off. Sorry, I'm coming in. We can't record if all mics are off. It still provides feedback and all that sort of thing, or?
Gwendolyn or Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we could record. The main issues are that it's just a cumbersome setup. Everybody has to have their own Zoom meeting on their own device. If anybody turns on audio, we get a horrific screech through the room. But we could record. It's just a bit spotty because we would be working all off one microphone, probably yours, I would imagine. So it doesn't pick up everybody very well, and the cameras don't pick up everybody particularly well, but we could do it.
And right now, whoever is speaking, there's the little yellow box around that. So it would always be on whatever computer is being used for the room. So it wouldn't identify on your screen, it would not identify who is speaking. It would just always be, if we were using, for instance, your computer, the yellow box would be around your picture, whether it was Councillor Noble or Ms. Kennedy or a member of the public speaking.
Councillor Antonelli, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's kind of premature to be putting numbers on that electronic participation. You know, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. The numbers right now are as high as they've ever been in the province. So I think at this point, we don't know, you know, the regulations that are coming down. We don't know. We don't have the equipment. We don't know how the pandemic is going to shift and move in the next couple of months as we go into winter. I think it's really premature to be bringing forward, you know, our own bylaws that say have to attend in a room we're not certain about with equipment we're also not certain about. I think we should leave it wide open for full electronic participation while we're dealing with the uncertainty, the equipment, and the building. And then we can review it in so many months and put it on the staff work list to come up with a long-term solution that meets everybody's needs, as well as the new council in 12 months.
Thank you. Okay, further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Sant.
I just want to agree with Councillor Antonelli. I think being open at this point is our best course of action. Basically, for all the reasons she stated, and for the upcoming council next year. At this point, we can see how the pandemic pans out and carry on. If we can attend in person, great. If not, then I don't think people should be. But like I said, I don't think tally should be taken, and we can carry on as per the norm until such time we can either get the new technology as per the recommendations we put forward now, and just go that direction.
Ms. Fraser, the clause that we put in the procedures bylaw, would that allow for, you know, the fact that the pandemic unfortunately is not over, or does that cover all those things that Councillor Antonelli was just pointing out?
Unfortunately not, because the ministerial orders have been concluded and the state of emergency is over. So as of June 21st, I believe it was, and then they gave us 3 months to sort it out. But in the meantime, they were changing the legislation. So we are going to have to amend our procedure bylaw if council chooses to go with fully electronic, which is certainly an option for council to do. What we will have to do is ensure that the council chambers is open for the public to attend and watch, and the council members wouldn't need to be there in person. And then either myself, Ms. Gilmore, or our manager of finance will have to be in that room throughout the meetings in the event that anybody from the public comes in. So,
but council can attend as well if they wish.
Council
correct?
could attend if you wanted to. So if, you know, basically what the government has said is we want you to go back and be meeting in person to the best of your ability and have a place where the public can come in person and watch and see what's happening. So if that's that's the case. I mean, our challenge would still be in our small council chambers. We would have a limited number of public that we could probably accommodate. One staff member would have to be in that room. And then any council members who would be in that room would have to have their computers on, but their sound off. We would have the screen on, and everybody would have to wear masks if the public are there. So
Would that also mean that we would have to have screening up between counselors and screening between the public and the council?
We would have, not that I'm not based on what we understand. I guess
Okay.
it depends if you wanted to be able to put in as many of the public as possible, then you would probably want to put a screen around each chair because we have a small space, and separating out those chairs limits us to maybe 5 people. Under our current bylaw, the only way we can continue to do this format is under a health, environmental, or state of safety emergency, which according to the province, we are no longer in.
You can have gatherings and meetings of up to fairly large numbers now. I mean, actually, numbers indoors, at work.
No, the public health order says that because we're a municipality, if we invite the public in, we have to wear masks, and there's certain restrictions on that.
Yeah, but dividing space dividers between people is not one of them, is what I was going to say.
Yeah, masks. Yeah.
Masks, yeah.
dividers are
I mean,
not-
but if you wanted to make sure that people felt really safe, we could implement that, but
Yeah.
that's a policy decision.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement.
Okay, so where do we want to go here? So I'm okay with the suggestion that we leave it open while we continue to sort things out. I do want to make sure that we don't leave it open, open-ended or indefinitely, because I think we want to get this right. The procedures bylaw is an important bylaw. It's there to make sure we're doing our jobs the way we're supposed to and in the best interest of the public. So I don't want to just leave it too open. I don't like the idea of having the ability to just attend all meetings electronically because you want to do whatever, I don't think it's a healthy way to do business in our world. But I get the fact that we don't know exactly where we're going here. We got lots of stuff to sort out. So I'm happy to leave it open as well, but I would like to do so only for a short period of time and then review this again. So right now the motion on the table is to have staff bring it back with some of the considerations that were given.
We could bring back some options,
Yeah. So I think we
which
should,
incorporating some of your thoughts.
including leaving it wide open for a certain period of time to allow us out as per Councillor Antonelli's comments.
I think we would need a resolution to review the procedures bylaw. I don't think we'd be able to have that within the bylaw.
No,
So
exactly.
we would, so we would amend the bylaw and we would work with that. And then we would have a council resolution that said in 6 months or 9 months or whatever council determines is the appropriate time to review the procedure bylaw. Then we would bring that back and have a conversation prior to amending it to see if this is still something that council is comfortable with and if they want to keep it or amend it.
Okay, I'm happy to go that route. I want to make sure that this council has a look at it again at least once. I don't think it's fair if you get a whole bunch of new councillors on to then have the procedure bylaw pop up 6 months into your term and say, hey, how do you guys want to do this? I think we all know the learning curve in this job. So I think it's important for us. We've gone through the pandemic, we've gone through Zoom, we've gone through regular meetings as a group. So I definitely want to see us review this in 6 months maximum. That'll be my opinion. So with the motion on the table, Sheena, do we do a friendly amendment to include some of Councillor Antonelli's thoughts, or how do you want to do it? Or is it a second motion?
So maybe I've lost the train here. I've got so many notes.
That's okay.
I don't have that do we have a motion on the table?
Well, you asked me for one, so.
Yeah,
but to bring
I don't
back,
think we put it there. I
Yeah.
don't think we got first and second on that.
no.
So yeah,
Bring back consideration to bring a procedure bylaw forward to considering at least, oh,
We were gonna look at other communities, what they were doing
Yeah.
with regards to quorum. We were gonna look and see what they might be doing in terms of total numbers of meetings allowed to attend electronically. So part of it was to, have a look at other communities. But I think to simplify our life right now, the other part of the motion should be, and to start the process of amending the procedures bylaw to allow for unlimited electronic meetings. Let's start that process. Again, that's for Councilor Antonelli's comments. That way it leaves us open. And then I would like to see the rest of it come back to us in a couple of months. Does that make sense?
that makes sense.
Does that make sense to the group? Ted's
No,
fine.
I'm not comfortable with that, Mayor Richmond. I feel that by leaving it open to attend all meetings electronically is not the way I would like to see it go. I'd like to see some different wording where council members are required to attend in person the majority of time, unless under circumstances they want to do it electronically. I'm concerned that all of a sudden we're going to turn council into 2 people in the meeting and the rest of the people at home. I guess I'm old school. I've been at this a long time, and maybe it is the future, and maybe what we're doing today is the future. And I'd still see a real benefit of meeting in person, and I just can't see it being 100% electronic for some people and some people in council chamber. So I'm struggling with this big time.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I agree almost entirely. I don't want to open that door for it. I think the suggestion is more just to enable staff to carry on doing their work and us be able to get our meetings. If we leave it open for now, we could certainly add some wording that you suggest, but the idea is leave it open for now so that while we're still sorting out, while staff is coming back with us, at least we have a plan for the next 3 months, I think is sort of the idea. I don't, and that's why I say I want to make sure that this comes back to us in the next couple of months, though, if that's the direction we go, and then a review again in the next 6 to 8 months after that.
Okay,
But I'm just trying to find a comfortable road for us here. I'm not married to any of it. Councillor Noble, go ahead.
I just want to say I understand Councillor Craddock's concerns, but it also just makes me think of something I heard some discussions during UBCM about women having trouble holding these positions because of things like maternity leave. And this could really help bridge that.
Mhm.
So just something I want to put out there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the resolution at UBCM would hopefully cover that anyway, Councillor Noble. The idea is that, maternity leave would be provided. The complicating part is that we're not employees, we're elected. And so the labor law around maternity doesn't apply to us. It would be to apply that law to us as elected officials. And therefore, it's not even a question. If you're having a child, you get maternity or paternity regardless. Go ahead.
Well, that's where I was thinking this actually covers a bigger picture better than just maternity leave. As Councillor Zant pointed out, daycare itself is a huge problem for so many too. That this could be helpful down the road if your babysitter falls through.
I 100% agree with you as well, Councillor Noble. And I think that's why we're struggling with it. We see the benefit of people being able to do this, remotely sometimes. I also, agree that there's some really important facets to doing this live and in person in front of each other and accessible to the public. So that's why we're all worried about trying to find a number. What is that number? What is that comfort zone that allows the parent to be a local politician and be properly engaged in the whole process? Because I agree with what you're saying. Unfortunately, if you leave the door too wide open, you will get, maybe not here in Pemberton, but you will get council members who do the very least possible and sit at home and they just don't want to come down because they can make their own tea at home or whatever it is, right? So we got to make sure that we're setting our procedures bylaw to ensure that we're doing our work responsibly. And that's why we're struggling with the number, because I think we agree with everything you just said as well. And that's why I don't think we're going to solve it all right now. So I think, we've given staff some direction in terms of what we want to see for the more permanent changes, or the more semi-permanent changes to the procedures bylaw. Do we want to, and does it make sense? Let me put it to staff quickly here. Does it make sense for us to amend the bylaw to leave it a little bit more open for the next few months while we go through this process? Does that help you guys work through this at a little bit better pace, or are we doing two sets of work?
We'd be doing two sets of work, so let's just leave it open.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
I think,
ahead.
if we're to look at it in 3 months, if the concern is from safety and from the pandemic, we'll be in the middle of the flu season, you have a sniffle, you're not coming in. Maybe it needs to be 6 months, so we're coming out of it. If we're doing it in a matter of 3 months, the amount of advertising and review and meetings, that I think would be too short a turnaround. I think it would just be a lot more work for us to have to deal with. I think 6 months, if the committee was agreeable, would be a little bit more of a reasonable turnaround. I think we just need to get something in place now with the uncertainty that's before us to be able to get this done. But with a target in mind to obviously, there's some valid concerns that you guys are discussing to bring it back so we're not lost. So it's not lost.
Okay.
At the end of the day, sorry.
Go ahead, Sheena.
Well, at the end of the day, we need to bring in a change to our procedure bylaw
Mhm.
unless all of council is prepared to meet in person going forward. So we need to have that, a draft bylaw or for first, second, and third reading by the 19th of October. We would need to advertise the 7th and the 14th in order to meet getting first, second, and third reading of a bylaw to allow us to continue to meet electronically in this form.
Yeah, I got that. Go ahead, Councilor Antonelli.
I think reviewing in 6 months, as CAO Gilmore said, makes sense. We'll know more where the pandemic is at. We'll have an idea of what our resources are. I think we should wrap up this conversation. We've been going in circles.
Thanks. I think we've actually fleshed out a lot of good stuff here. And that's how we've gotten to this point. So I think a 6-month review makes sense to me as well. I could totally support that. So we would, unless there's more comment on that, we would look for a motion then to have staff make amendments to the bylaw and bring it back, allowing unlimited electronic attendance from council and staff. And that's staff bring back a more comprehensive review of the procedures bylaw in February of 2022. Further discussion. Is there more in there that you'd like, Sheena?
That will work.
I get a motion to that effect. Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that's it for committee of the whole. So let's get a quick motion to adjourn committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Antonelli. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.